All right, today we're going to talk about one of the most powerful, most revolutionary ideas in all of science. I'm talking about Darwin's theory of evolution. This is the idea that just completely changed how we see life on this planet.
So, let's jump right in. I want you to picture this. It's the early 1800s. You've got scientists sailing all over the globe, and they're staring at this giant puzzle. Where did all this incredible, mind-boggling variety of life actually come from? And why do you see fossils of animals that just aren't here anymore? But then other animals seem like they were perfectly custom-made for where they live. All these questions, they were all swirling around one huge central mystery.
Okay, so to really get why Darwin's idea was such a big deal, we gotta look at what the world was like before him. See, the common belief at the time felt super certain, but the actual evidence, it just wasn't adding up.
So back then, the main idea was pretty simple, right? Everything was just fixed. A lion was a lion, an oak tree was an oak tree, forever and ever, created in its perfect final form. That was it. End of story. Case closed. Or was it?
Because here's the thing, the evidence was piling up, and man, it was telling a completely different story. You had geologists digging up these fossils of totally bizarre creatures that just didn't exist anymore. Explorers were finding animals that looked so similar, but were on different continents, separated by thousands of miles of ocean. And everywhere they looked, naturalists were seeing creatures that were just perfectly suited to their little corner of the world. The old theory, it couldn't explain any of it. There was a giant piece of the puzzle missing. They needed a mechanism. Some way for things to change.
And this is where our main character enters the scene, a young, super curious naturalist named Charles Darwin. He was about to go on a trip that wasn't just going to change his life, it was going to change our entire understanding of the world.
So in 1831, Darwin hops on the ship, the HMS Beagle, for what was supposed to be a 5-year trip around the world. And this guy was a collector, a hardcore observer. He noticed everything. But it was one particular stop at this tiny, remote chain of volcanic islands out in the Pacific that would change everything. You guessed it, the Galapagos. And on the Galapagos, Darwin saw something that just blew his mind. He's looking at these little birds, these finches, and he realizes the birds on this island have a slightly different beak from the ones on that island, and each beak was perfectly shaped for the kind of food found there. Then he looks at the giant tortoises, same story, different shell shapes depending on which island they came from. He was seeing variation everywhere, and it was all tied to the specific environment.
And that was the first domino to fall. Suddenly, that old idea of fixed, unchanging species, it couldn't be true. Life wasn't this static thing. No, it was dynamic. It was actively adapting to its surroundings. And right there, that was the spark.
So Darwin gets back to England, and you'd think he'd rush to publish this incredible idea, right? Nope. He spends the next 20 years obsessively studying everything. I'm talking barnacles, pigeons, you name it. He was piecing together the clues, hunting for the secret mechanism behind all the changes he'd seen.
And you know where he found his big breakthrough? In something surprisingly normal. Animal breeding. Darwin was totally fascinated by how farmers and pigeon fanciers could pick and choose certain traits. Make wool fluffier or breed pigeons with specific colors. And then it hit him. If humans can make these huge changes in just a few generations, what could nature do with all the power and time in the world?
And that question led him to his big idea, the central engine of his theory, natural selection. It sounds complicated, but it's actually super elegant, and it breaks down into 4 simple steps. Okay, step 1, variation. Look around, no 2 individuals are ever exactly the same. Step 2, overproduction. Pretty much all living things have way more kids than can possibly survive. And that leads directly to step 3, competition. Everybody's competing for food, for mates, for a place to live. And finally, step 4, the one that ties it all together, survival of the fittest. The individuals who just happen to have a trait that gives them a tiny advantage, they're more likely to survive, have kids of their own, and pass on that winning trait. Now, repeat that process over millions of years, and you can shape an entire species.
And we have got to clear something up right now, a huge misunderstanding. Fittest does not mean strongest or fastest or biggest. Not at all. It means the best fit for a specific environment. Think about it. A tiny little mouse with great camouflage is way fitter in a forest than a big, brightly colored mouse that a hawk can spot from a mile away. It is all about adaptation.
Okay, so Darwin has his groundbreaking idea. But he knew an idea, no matter how good, isn't enough. Not in science. He needed evidence, a mountain of evidence to convince a very skeptical world. And that is exactly what he spent the next 2 decades gathering. And he didn't just have one piece of proof, he attacked it from all sides. He pointed to the fossil record, which showed these slow, gradual changes in species over vast stretches of time. He looked at how animals are distributed around the globe, which only makes sense if they evolved and moved around. And he looked really, really closely at the bodies of animals themselves.
You know, one of his absolute killer arguments came from what we call comparative anatomy. Just look at a human hand, a bat's wing, and a whale's flipper. On the outside, they do totally different things, right? Grasping, flying, swimming. But if you look at the bones inside, it's the same basic blueprint. The only explanation that makes any sense is that they all inherited that bone structure from a common ancestor, way back when.
Now this next part is something Darwin could never have dreamed of. Today, we have a tool that confirms his theory in a way that would have just blown his mind. Genetics. See that number right there? 98.8%. That is how much DNA we humans share with chimpanzees, our closest living relatives. It's like finding a family history literally written in our genetic code.
So after all those years of painstaking work, decades of it, the time had come. It was time to share his dangerous, revolutionary idea with the world. And this was the moment that was going to light a fire, a debate that really is still going on today. So, in 1859, Darwin publishes On the Origin of Species, and bam, it hits the world like a thunderclap. It was an instant sensation. The entire first print run sold out on day one, and its arguments were absolutely radical. He was saying that all species evolve, that all life is connected in one massive family tree, and that all the beautiful, complex design you see in nature, it could be explained by a simple, natural process. No magic required.
And the reaction? Oh, it was explosive. I mean, scientists argued about it like crazy. A lot of religious groups immediately rejected it, especially what it seemed to say about where humans came from. But as time went on, the evidence just kept piling up in Darwin's favor. More and more fossils were discovered, filling in the gaps. And then, the discovery of genetics and DNA? That provided the missing piece Darwin never had, the how of inheritance. His theory didn't just survive the arguments, it got stronger with every single new thing we discovered.
So why do we still talk about this so much today? Because Darwin's theory isn't just some old idea, it is the absolute foundation of all modern biology. It explains everything, from the incredible diversity of life on Earth to super practical, urgent problems, like why bacteria are becoming resistant to our antibiotics. This isn't just ancient history, it's happening all around us right now.
There's a great quote that really gets to the heart of all this. It is not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent. It is the one most adaptable to change. That's it. That's the whole game. It's not about being the biggest or the smartest. It's about being able to roll with the punches, to adapt to a world that is constantly, always changing.
So what Darwin showed us is that life isn't a finished painting. It's more like a movie that's still being filmed. Evolution didn't stop back with the dinosaurs, and it sure as heck didn't stop with us. It is a continuous, ongoing process. Which leaves us with one last, really fascinating question to think about. What comes next?